This is incredibly helpful to have this longitudinal look at everything that happened from the time the election was conducted all the way through to January 6th, because I think we lost sight of the way in which all of this was linked up. This is an effort to use the Constitution, to actually use legitimate legal means for the purpose of overthrowing a democratically conducted election.
That was Professor Melissa Murray discussing a special report we aired for the first time Friday about looking at Trump's conduct not through the lens of only January 6th or even only the violence, but a larger illegal coup conspiracy. We have Jill Wine-Banks, here live tonight. She's handled exactly these kind of cases, including the Watergate prosecution. And we did this special to try to take that broader look through the evidence, which had the necessity of taking the time to go through it all, as you know, Jill, which meant that we actually, for that entire hour Friday, only heard from one extra live guest. But Ms. Wine-Banks is here tonight live to go over it a little bit more. And in the spirit of that, I want to mention those 8 distinct plots that we discussed began with some that were either legal or probably defensively lawful, while 6 of the plots turned red by the end, were involving crimes. In no way can I condense all of this tonight, but for Jill Wine-Banks being basically our second guest on this reporting, I want to show you a few of the key parts from this special. When you actually understand how this started and how many different plots were pursued, thwarted, warned about, and then desperately doubled down upon, that goes to the criminal intent.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
I was saying that we should not go and declare victory.
The results were still being counted.
I think we need a special counsel that we put in place before Inauguration Day to get to the bottom of this. I think we need to seize a lot of those voting machines.
You've got Ted Cruz, you've got Lindsey Graham, you've got Tom Cotton from Harvard Law School. You've got some heavies over in the Senate.
You're finally able to see how all of these things stack on top of each other and that they're all part of a joined up effort, some might say a conspiracy, to bring all of this into fruition.
Taken together, well, this evidence suggests the question is no longer whether there are any indictable election offenses here, but how prosecutors would explain a failure to indict and enforce the law, and how that does risk letting the close call of this documented and attempted multi-pronged coup conspiracy turn into a training exercise that American democracy may not survive. Jill Wine-Banks is here. I give you the floor to walk us through your legal analysis of what it means to widen out from January 6th, which is where the Justice Department has been squarely focused, and understand there may be a criminal conspiracy case that runs weeks, if not months.
I agree with how you presented it on Friday and think everyone should watch that. You were absolutely correct. I have long said that January 6th is just one of the tentacles of this broad conspiracy. There is an overarching conspiracy. That was one more way they tried to stop the election from being counted the way it was voted. Voters vote for electors, which is a silly thing, and we should probably get rid of the Electoral College, but that's how we do it now. They expect that when they vote, that's who's going to cast the ballots, are the electors they vote for. So there was all of these attempts. There were lawsuits, which, while they may have been legal, were totally frivolous and were thrown out. Then you started with the pressure on Pence. Then you started with the pressure on state legislatures. Then you started with the fake electors. And even when they were setting it up, they said it was fake electors. So you have all of these things, and they were all failing. So then on the day that it was going to be certified, he invited and unleashed a mob on the Capitol to do its job to delay and to stop the peaceful transfer of power, which is one of the keystones of our democracy. So if we can't count on our votes being counted, and if we can't count on a peaceful transfer of power when we, the people, vote for a particular candidate, then we don't have a democracy anymore. So I see this as a very big conspiracy. I see individual parts of it that are also illegal. So it's not just a conspiracy which requires an agreement. There are conducts, 2383, which is the insurrection, does not require an agreement. It just requires that he have done the violent provocation. And that one is a really good law to use because one of the penalties of that is that you can never hold office again. There's also part of the Federal Records Act that also says you can no longer hold federal office if you violate the Federal Records Act, something that clearly
Jill,
is true.
This is why people say talking to you in a good way is like talking to an actual law book, but more interesting, because you could just rattle it off. I'm only jumping in to get the other news. I mentioned the conspiracy case that we looked at in that special. The other news today, 2 items. One, the longest sentence yet handed down against any insurrectionist or trespasser, 7 years in the DOJ. In contrast to some of what we heard elsewhere, wanted to go even harder, having them treated as an actual terrorist, domestic terrorist, convicted. It's a hefty sentence, though, for that militia member. And new reporting that Donald Trump's lawyers are formally working on presenting their defense, according to 3 sources, a legal defense against criminal charges. That means they are at least preparing for the possibility of an indictment. Jill, I wanted your reaction to that. I want to be as precise as possible with the news here. Lawyers working on something means that it is possible, meaning they obviously view it as more of a concern than they might have, say, randomly 5 years ago. It does not in any way open the door to the secret process in Georgia or Washington. We don't know what's going to come out of that, and I don't want to confuse that point. But having given it that care, your reaction to this and the lawyers preparing a Trump defense?
I think it's smart to start preparing, but I think that there is basically no real defense. I mean, the thing we've heard, for example, was that it can't be a lie. This is what he filed in his civil case, or not case, but he sent a letter threatening to sue CNN and said, it's not a lie because I subjectively believed that it was true. Well, that isn't how the law works. It is a lie if the facts don't line up with it. And if you know that it's a lie, and if you willfully ignore all the truth that you are being given, it's still a lie. So I don't see any legitimate defenses to these things. There are some, and I mean, if I were a defense lawyer, I could think of some where I might argue that even in Georgia, he didn't say, I want you to make up these things. He said, I want you to, out of all the false ballots that were cast, just find the right number that will get me elected, get me one more than I lost by. And, you know, he can argue that he really believed that. I don't think that anyone could possibly think that that was true.
Right. And you're partly alluding to defenses that don't work, which is why they might bring in the real lawyers to prepare some defenses that work better. And as we always say, in the event of an indictment, people are legally presumed innocent. They get their time in court. That's how that process works. But it is interesting to see some of this all developing at once. Jill Wine-Banks, as mentioned, we wanted you on Friday, but we got time for you tonight. That's how it works. Thanks for being here.